Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you guys are having a great day. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different, and I know I say that a lot, but today, this genuinely is going to be a bit of a departure for me. It's not something I've ever had to really kind of teach or talk about at great length before, so this is going to be kind of an interesting episode today. Today, we're going to be doing our first real flying lesson. I'm going to teach you guys a little bit of what I know about how to navigate around the world using Elytra. And Elytra are such a fantastic addition. They've been in the game since Minecraft 1.9, and they're really, really useful. But a lot of people don't necessarily know quite how to get around with them, and there are some kind of advanced tips and tricks, I guess, that you can use Elytra for that don't even involve flying necessarily. So think of this more of as an Elytra lesson than a flying lesson. For a start, let's take a look at our equipment. We have ourselves some Elytra. Elytra do not come enchanted. I've enchanted these myself using Unbreaking 3 and Mending. That is what I recommend putting on your Elytra from day one, if possible. Some people don't recommend putting Mending on an Elytra because it is possible to repair them using Phantom Membrane. But that, of course, requires you to kill some phantoms, which isn't going to be the easiest thing to do for some players. And also, each time you repair them with Phantom Membrane, the repair cost will effectively double. So you start off repairing them for 1 level, and then 2 levels, and then 4 levels, and then 8 levels. Whenever anything gets past 39 levels in Minecraft, which Elytra would do after about 7 or 8 repairs, it becomes impossible to repair them, at which point if your Elytra gets damaged and breaks, the only opportunity you have to repair that durability, is to use the Mending enchantment. So that's why I recommend skipping that whole process entirely and just having Mending. You can keep the Phantom Membrane for slow falling potions and stuff like that. Speaking of which, I might actually brew up a slow falling potion because there's something we can get to later on in this episode about how slow falling and Elytra can interact in a fun way. So we will get to that in just a second. I'll start those brewing now. In the meantime, let's take a look at the other essential piece of kit for flying with Elytra: fireworks. Firework rockets, the basic firework rockets, are required for boosting yourself using Elytra, and that means effectively Elytra are not so much wings as gliders. You don't flap your wings, you just kind of soar through the air slowly, and that means without fireworks, it isn't really all that easy to get off the ground. You need to start from a high place, give yourself a boost of sorts, either with like a slime block launcher or something like that, or just getting up to the top of a mountain nearby, or an ender pearl or something like that, or you can use fireworks to boost yourself into the air. Now, the problem with fireworks is that there are a great variety of fireworks out there if you follow some of the recipes that you'll find in places like the Minecraft Wiki, and there are options to create a wide variety of effects with fireworks, usually by combining gunpowder and dye and a couple of other ingredients. So combining gunpowder and dye in a crafting interface will get you a firework star. Then combining this firework star with a little bit of gunpowder and paper will get you a firework which has that firework star's effect. You'll notice here under the flight duration it says small ball orange. There are a whole variety of firework recipes out there, and those are crafted for effects. For example, if I let off this firework indoors, it's perfectly safe to do, so don't worry. There we go. A pretty orange ball appears like that. The thing about these fireworks is that they are not safe for flying because the explosion that takes place after that will actually damage you, whereas the fireworks I have made for flight exclusively do not have any kind of descriptions after them. They just say flight duration 1, and they are crafted using only gunpowder and paper. Those are the only 2 ingredients you need for these boost fireworks. By combining paper and gunpowder in a crafting interface, whether it's the crafting table or your player interface, you get these rockets, which have a flight duration of 1 because they only use 1 gunpowder to craft. These will have a short flight duration. Now, if you add an additional gunpowder into the recipe, if you have 2 gunpowder split over multiple slots in the crafting interface, you end up with rockets that have a flight duration of 2, a medium flight duration. And then by adding another gunpowder, you get a flight duration of 3, which is the longest duration rockets can let you travel. Typically, you will be using Elytra to cover long distances, or maybe to get from the bottom of a build to the top if you're building with a decent amount of height, and maybe you don't have ender pearls, or you prefer not to use ender pearls because you take damage from using them, that kind of thing. So it depends entirely up to your personal preference what kind of flight duration you want, also how much gunpowder you have, because remember, any time that you're using the flight duration 3 rockets, you're essentially tripling the amount of gunpowder you need to use to make rockets in the first place. So generally speaking, I stick to flight duration 1, but that's totally a matter of personal preferences and the resources available to you. Enough talking, let's see them in action. Let's get up to the top of a hill over here, somewhere where you can take our first little flight from, and let's start off nice and simple. Let's start off by just leaping off off of something high and engaging our Elytra, and I'll show you a little bit about how that works. This is good. This would be adequate for our needs, but I'm thinking something impressively high. There we go. I think this is a little better. Now I'm on a floating island up in the mountains near Founder's Forge, and there's a decent amount of a drop underneath us, so I can explain a little bit about gliding before we get into the firework boosting aspect of things. Now, the control system I'm about to describe basically applies to the Java edition, and I'm fairly certain it applies to versions of the Bedrock edition that you can control with either a keyboard and mouse or a controller. I am less confident about describing how Elytra works on mobile devices because they involve like a tap-based interface, and I've been told that Elytra flying is a little bit fiddly on those versions. Unfortunately, I'm not that familiar with those versions, so I don't have a great deal of advice for you. So I figure there are probably better people to explain that, and I'm just going to try and explain what I know to you guys. So to activate your Elytra, you need to take the bold leap of jumping, and then as you are coming down from your jump, pressing the jump button again to activate your Elytra. Now, this naturally is a little bit easier to do if the fall from your jump is greater than the height you've jumped in the first place, which means it's easiest to activate your Elytra when you're jumping off something. So I'm going to jump from this and press spacebar again, and that activates my Elytra and puts me in glide mode, enabling me to glide around freely. Once I've got that with a firework in my hand, I can right-click like so, and that will boost me up into the air. Now, I'm controlling the angle of my flight exclusively by looking around using the mouse. There isn't any way of locking off the camera so you can look around. If you are looking down at the ground, you are flying down towards the ground. So keep that in mind when you're flying. Make sure that you don't end up losing too much height or accidentally putting yourself on a collision course with the ground just because you want to look down at it. This can be a little bit troublesome if you have a computer with like a lower spec and you find that chunks don't load very quickly in front of you when you're flying. So my advice in those situations is always to take flight a little bit cautiously. Make sure that you're not going to be on a collision course with a mountain just because it hasn't loaded in front of you yet. So those are the basics of takeoff, really. It's a little bit easier to do if you've got a little bit of a drop to jump down and then engage your wings, and then you can glide around a little bit. As for whether you glide in first person or third person, that's really a personal preference. For the longest time, I used to only use my Elytra in third person mode like this because it helps to see when your wings actually engage behind you like that. But some people don't prefer that. Some people find third person in Minecraft a little bit distracting and that you have to flip around between perspectives before you get back to first person. So some people just get used to flying around in first person. It's also a little bit easier to take off in single player than it is on some multiplayer servers because it requires a little bit less lag, and some people, depending on their ping, their connection to the server, and also the amount of data the server is having to process in the form of game ticks, can actually make it very difficult for people to take off. You'll often find people on especially built-up multiplayer servers, folks like the Hermitcraft guys, jumping around a great deal trying to get their Elytra to activate and having the hardest time because their server is having to process so much stuff and because their connection to the server might not be as strong. In a single player world though, especially if the world isn't having to process too much in the way of redstone contraptions and other stuff that might cause lag, it is perfectly possible to launch yourself from the ground. And to do that, I'm going to go into third person mode here to demonstrate, because as I jump, I'm going to press the spacebar a second time as I'm coming down from the peak of my jump, and you'll notice that just for a second my wings open out a little bit there. And sorry, it's doing some weird things with the perspective, but that's the camera interacting with that grass block down there and trying to move the camera slightly closer to me. There we go. If you look at that like so, you can notice the wings are actually starting to do something behind me when I manage to time that right. Now, the cool thing about this is that actually opens out the wings and immediately enables you to fly using rockets, meaning that if you time it right and you hit that boost the second time around, you can actually use the firework to propel yourself into the air. Occasionally, depending on the timing, it's a little bit difficult to do, and you'll see it just propelled me a couple of blocks there and landed me on the path. But if I get this right a second time, here we go. Yes, there we are. Okay, we're in the air now. Now, it does take a couple of tries to get this right. It can take a little bit of practice. It's a little bit of a trial and error thing. But sooner or later, especially if you're on a single-player world and you have a nice, well-performing system, you will probably find yourself able to do this with a little bit of practice. Of course, to do that, you'll probably want to get yourself a decent source of gunpowder like the mob farm we built in the previous episode. That's kind of how I'm able to fly around without worrying too much about the amount of fireworks I'm using here, because we've got a decent supply of gunpowder and a sugarcane farm to take care of the paper. While I'm up here on the roof of the Blacksmith's Guild, I might as well show you what happens when you fire a firework that has a firework star inside of it. This is a regular firework, just boosting me into the air, and this is a firework star firework. Boom. Here we go. Here's that again. There you go. You're moving slightly too fast to be able to see the explosion happen behind you, but it does still happen if you turn around. And that's the reason that you shouldn't use fireworks with firework stars, because we took a little bit of damage there that I'm now having to heal up as I fly. It's also important not to be looking directly at any blocks. Like the wireframe around that block indicates that I'm looking at it. And if you do that while you try and take off, there's a chance that you will fire your firework. You'll just let the firework off against that block. So ideally, it's best to be looking up into the air when you take off. And it's nice and easy to do that because you're naturally wanting to look up into the air when you take off because that's where you're going. But sometimes if you're looking around you as you want to take off and you happen to catch the edge of a block or something like that, especially if there's tall grass around you and things like that, you can end up letting off the firework like that instead of taking off into the air. Once you're comfortable flying around, you have to learn the art of landing. And landing is a little bit more complex than you might think, because it is possible to generate quite a lot of speed when you're traveling with Elytra, especially if you have a trident with Riptide, which I don't currently have, so I'm not able to showcase that. We'll have to catch up with that in a future episode. But if you just generate a little bit of speed by flying, if you're flying downwards especially, you can actually build up quite a velocity, and it is possible to damage yourself if you hit the ground too hard or if you hit a wall directly when you're flying with Elytra. There you go, I took 2 hearts of damage, and that's not even the maximum amount of damage you can take. You can really injure yourself. Note that I'm also wearing protection armor and feather falling boots, which I think go some way to protecting you against damage taken by falling or flying into large surfaces. So the way to limit the amount of speed you have when you're using Elytra is by turning. Anytime you take a turn, you will reduce the amount of momentum you currently have, and that means you can come in for a much softer landing just by turning gradually as you come down. It's also possible to turn super fast to completely kill your momentum in the air. Your character will sort of roll over a little bit. We almost did a barrel roll there. And this way, it is possible to do some really soft landings. Like we'll come in for a landing on this tree, like so. You just have to turn the camera to the left and to the right a little bit like that. That will slow you down to the point where you can stop on a dime and hopefully land where you want to go. Now, when it comes to precision landings, if you've got to land on a single block, it varies in your approach once again, whether you want to do this in third person or first person. Because in first person, it might be a little bit more precise to see exactly where your player is going to land when you're approaching the block, but then in third person, it's going to be a lot easier to see when you're on the block or not, because depending on your perspective, the block might be directly below your feet and you might be looking this way. So in third person, it's a little bit easier to see, but it might be slightly more difficult to make your approach. So again, camera angles and so forth is really up to you. In addition to that, by default, the perspective changes are bound to the F5 key, which can be a little bit difficult to reach while you're trying to maneuver with W, A, S, and D, or maybe hold shift to crouch on something so you don't immediately fall off the edge. What I have done is rebind the F5 perspective change to the R key on the keyboard, which is a lot easier for me to reach when I'm holding shift at the same time. So that allows me to change my perspective if I want to and land on the edge of something while still holding shift to sneak and make sure that I don't fall off a block. So let's go back to our floating island up here and see if I'm able to stick the landing. It's not exactly a 1-block landing, so I think I should be okay. Let's come in for a nice high angle, and we should be able to hit it sideways on like this. Let's do another quick sweep around, and there we go. Yep, I'm gonna hit. Oh, I hit shift at the end there, but I didn't quite land on the block fully, and that's what tipped me off. If you miss a landing like that, you might need to catch another firework. There we go. A little bit easier to land in third person for me. You sometimes need to waste another firework on getting yourself back up there in the first place, regaining that height. It's a good thing I bought another stack of fireworks, isn't it? There we go. Right, now let's talk a little bit about the angle we're flying at, because the angle can actually mean a lot in terms of how many fireworks you save. It can help you conserve fireworks if you don't have a great deal of them, and it can also vary your speed quite a lot. As you fly upwards, you'll notice that your feet start to wave behind you and you start to lose momentum. You start to stall in the air. And to counteract that, you need to swoop down a little bit, both to regain speed and to regain stability. Now, there are actually precise angles that you can look at, unless this has been patched out of the game, where it is possible to gain enough momentum and then change your angle so that you're looking upwards, and you can actually gain height this way. It is possible to kind of infinitely gain height that way without having to use fireworks. However, the angles that are required to do that and the timing required to do that is actually really precise, so you won't find a lot of players doing that at all. You might also notice that you stall faster if you're flying directly upwards. So sometimes if you're trying to gain height, it is actually a little bit better to angle yourself slightly so that you can reach build height a little bit faster if you're flying at an angle. You keep the momentum that you have a little bit more that way. Likewise, you can gain a lot of momentum by flying downwards, but you lose a lot of height that way, and it's a little bit tricky to regain that height afterwards. So think a little bit about how you're using your fireworks and your momentum as you go. If you're up high to begin with, it is possible to swoop down and gain a little bit of momentum and travel a little bit further. And this can prevent you from spamming fireworks, which I find a lot of people end up doing, and they end up running out of fireworks very quickly. And without a supply of gunpowder, that can put you in hot water fast because you'll be a long way from home and have no means of getting back using your Elytra. So it is kind of necessary to master a little bit of the changes in momentum that you can get and to glide a little bit more instead of just spamming a firework every couple of seconds to get you there a little bit faster. Once you've hit a maximum speed with the Elytra, you're not really going to travel any faster than that. It's also worth keeping an eye on the durability of your Elytra, and as you can see, just by flying around today, we've actually run the Elytra down to about half durability. If I didn't have Unbreaking 3, that would have broken about 5 minutes ago. And Elytra don't break permanently, they just turn into tattered forms of the wings that can only be repaired with a Phantom Membrane or the Mending Enchantment, as I mentioned earlier, but it's not very convenient to be stuck in the middle of nowhere with a broken pair of Elytra on your back. So in cases like that, you need to keep an eye on your durability, make sure that you're not flying around too much, and stop to regain some experience where possible, even if that means fighting a couple of mobs or quickly smelting up something or something like that. If you can go mining for redstone or diamonds or anything like that, that's going to get you some quick experience, that will be enough. And remember, if you remove any other items with mending from your currently equipped items, you should have a slightly easier time of getting all the XP channeled into your Elytra so you can mend it that little bit faster. One last thing before we sleep the night away, it's actually possible to travel through 1 high gaps using Elytra. Yes, that was a 2 high gap, and yes, we got caught a little bit on the stone there, but thankfully Minecraft was going easy on me and didn't feel like stopping me like that. Now, these are not 1 block high gaps. Let's see if we can make them into 1 block high gaps and test my flying skills, because it's been a while since I've done anything like this, but it is possible when you are in Elytra flight mode to travel through 1 block high gaps, because essentially you are horizontal. And this didn't used to be possible at all in Minecraft until Elytra came along, and since then swimming has been included in the game, and it's possible to swim through 1 block high gaps as well. But this is really quite interesting, and let's see if we can give this a go. Oh, we didn't quite make it. Okay, yeah, my skills are not up to scratch, but believe me, it is possible. I'm going to try this a couple of times, making sure I eat as I go so I don't take too much damage. And, oh, I need to be a little bit higher each time. I think I'm losing momentum as I come up to this and end up hitting the wall because I dip down too low. And the amount of fireworks I've used for this each time will probably indicate quite how successful I've been at it there. I got through the hole at least. I didn't come out very well on the other side, but I got through the hole. Oh, there we go. Okay, just about managed to squeeze through. And fun though it may be to do those things at high speeds, obviously it makes it a lot more dangerous, so it may actually be better for you to do that a little bit slower. But as you can see, I'm not all that great at it. I'm down to 12 rockets and 21 fish because I've just spent the last few minutes smashing myself against a wall and having to heal the damage. Luckily for me though, the last 2 things I want to cover in this video do not even require fireworks at all, because they are Electro techniques that you can use if you're just wearing one traveling around on the ground. Now, a lot of the time, you'll notice, I'm going to take my Elytra off for this, you'll notice players running around in Minecraft and jumping as they travel if they want to get somewhere fast. The reason for that being that jumping actually gives you a little bit of extra momentum and can be faster even than sprinting. Like, I'm walking around regularly now I'm sprinting, and now I'm jumping. So it does actually get you places a little bit faster. Obviously, the view bobbing element of this can get a little bit sickly for some people, so I try not to do it too much as I'm navigating around in the world, but sometimes you'll catch me doing that on video if I want to go places. Now, the Elytra add an extra element to this, and I've re-equipped them for the purposes of this next demonstration, because if you are mashing space, more or less, as you jump around, it's actually possible to get a little extra dip here and there using the Elytra, and that can can allow you to travel a little bit faster, especially if you're traveling over terrain where you can glide down a little bit and pick up a little bit of momentum as you go. It is possible to move around quite quickly this way. It's not necessarily the most pleasant thing to do, especially if you suffer from a little bit of nausea when you play video games, but it still gets you around a little bit faster. And if you combine it, for example, with a quick swoop, and then you can travel over a ravine like so, it is possible to integrate it into your movement as you move around your world. Again, you will find this a little bit easier to do on single-player worlds and worlds where there isn't so much stuff built up because you don't have too much lag going on, whereas on multiplayer servers, you might find it a little bit difficult to do, especially once the server has progressed a little way. I just realized I completely forgot about the slow-falling potions that I'd brewed up at the start of this episode. I set that up right at the beginning, and then I completely forgot about it. Well, no worries, because I've got a couple here, and slow falling is a great effect because, of course, it will prevent fall damage. If you fall from a great height, the speed that you fall is limited, and you slowly glide down, meaning that you don't take any fall damage, no matter how high you fall from, as long as the potion remains in effect. What this means for Elytra flight is that it actually slows your descent. It is not possible to fall particularly slowly. Like, even though I'm looking at the ground right now, and technically speaking, I am traveling down at the fastest I can, it's still a lot slower than you would normally be if you were flying with Elytra, and the potion particles kind of trail behind you in a fun way as well. So even though I'm technically speaking stalling right now, my legs are waving frantically behind me, yeah, it doesn't really have that much of an effect, does it? Because the slow falling is slowing the speed of my descent. That's all really, but it's fun to experiment with this effect, especially if you're building stuff and you want to slowly fly around something that you're building in the air. It's also really good for fighting the dragon because you don't have to worry too much about falling. The other thing is making sure that the effect lasts a little bit longer than when your durability runs out on your Elytra, which will enable you to fall out of the sky without actually taking any damage if your wings break. The final trick I have for you today is something a little bit fun, and it's something that I already showcased once when we were doing the blacksmith over there. When we were working on the auto smelter itself, I was able to duck behind the hoppers into a one-block space. Now, I mentioned obviously before and tried smashing myself against a wall to prove that Elytra can allow you to travel through a one-block space. But by employing the technique we just had of kind of mashing space and doing this sort of bouncing, bobbing, dipping motion as you travel around, it is possible to navigate yourself through one-block holes. Now, at first, when you duck down, you get a little bit of resistance, you get a little bit of friction against the hole in front of you. But if you tap the sprint key, it will actually allow you to push through. Now, I'm going to show you what this looks like in third person because it doesn't look quite as cool as you think. There isn't any kind of crawling animation in Minecraft because this isn't an intended mechanic. It's just something they've kind of left in the game and left you able to do. But you'll notice if I jump like this and I'm able to kind of smush myself through, but I'm still stood completely upright in the... Yeah, there we go. I've just phased through that block, basically, because there isn't a crawling animation for the player, and it doesn't even keep you in the horizontal flying or swimming animation while you're doing that. You are just standing up and pushing yourself through it, which looks a little bit weird. And when you're in first person, it's really something that you can ignore because you don't need to worry too much about that stuff. It's also possible to create tunnels that you can go through like this. And once you get past the first block, it becomes a little bit easier to navigate through, meaning that you can even create little small one-block high bases like this if you have a working set of Elytra. It might be a little bit difficult to navigate at first, but believe me, it can be done. And there are some folks who have concepts for one-block high bases out there, these kind of mouse hole style bases that are only possible to access using Elytra. And that kind of stuff is fascinating to me, and one of the most creative examples of exploiting this kind of Elytra behavior that I've seen for a long time. And people don't tend to make them all that much, but they're always kind of entertaining when they do. That is going to be it for this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you guys learned a little bit about how Elytra can be useful and how to fly with them if you are having a little bit of trouble. I hope this episode was helpful to you. If it was, or if you just enjoyed the episode in general, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you won't miss future episodes. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon. Take care. Bye for now.